Now this right here, as most of you brothers know and sisters know, this is the Bacchus. This is the Roman god of wine, revelry, and fertility, also associated with Dionysus and Pan, the god of the woodlands. And we also know that the term bachelor comes from the Bacchus. You know, you have a baccalaureate, it comes from the Bacchus, because these things that's associated with the Bacchus in terms of wine and revelry, it's also associated with, the college dynamic where you have the parties and you see the Bacchus depicted with the bay leaf. The bay leaf or the laurel leaf, baccalaureate, is inspired the college campuses or the understanding of the bachelor degree. Bachelor, baccalaureate, it goes back to Bacchus and the bay leaf, the laurel leaf that he's holding right there, the laurel leaf. And the wine also associated with blood. So we understand these different elements associated with the Bacchus, and it plays out throughout the world. The Bacchus is the god of this world. Just going back to Nimrod, who was the son of Cush, Ba. Ba means son, so Bacchus, son of Cush. Now we know that a bachelor is pretty much a single man. And when it comes to the understanding of these parties, these bachelor parties, where a person or a man gets into his element before he gets married, goes back to the Bacchus and the Bacchanalia, the festivals, the ancient festivals where Romans would go into wine and revelry in veneration of the Bacchus. So when it comes to the understanding of the bachelor party for a man, a single man, it's understanding, it's understandable, in terms of these connections. It's not hard to believe, Bacchus, bachelor, it's right there. Baccalaureate, the laurel leaf associated with the Bacchus, So it's always important for us to understand the inspiration and the origins of these things that we uphold, like graduation or cap and gown or customs or holiday. Very, very important, so we can, have a better grasp as to why we shouldn't celebrate these things or why we shouldn't uphold these things and just put these things in its proper perspective. But most of us don't do that because it's so easy for us to get hooked and be impressed upon. And we look at these things and it's easy for us to hold it in high regard because we hold college in high regard. We hold, being able to go to the next level in high regard, not understanding that these things represent something that's more sinister than what we know or what we can conceive. But at the same time, it's a part of this world. It really just speaks to the elements of this Babylonian world that we live in. It's all under the umbrella of Luciferianism. In part, you have Masonry. You have the understanding with religions and certain holidays that people celebrate with these customs going back to the pagan. It's all under the umbrella of Luciferianism. So, when it comes to this understanding, it's no different in regards to you finding out Santa Claus isn't real, So just when it comes to the understanding of the cap and gown, it was known as a mortarboard cap, right? As far as the cap, not the gown, but just the cap, the graduation cap, right? So this is an article from Russell Herner. Let's just get into it. There are many old customs and traditions that people participate in today without ever really knowing the original purpose for doing so. That's a fact. Just as I said, when it comes to Christmas and all these different holidays, we celebrate these things and don't even question its origin at all. A lot of people do that. And then when you tell somebody about these things, they still it's like whatever to them. It's, they're impervious to it because they've been hooked. They've been broken down spiritually to the point where they can't see it as something that they shouldn't be involved in. It's just like whatever. That's why certain people have no real moral compass, no real righteous compass. They just don't. And it's not to knock them, but it just speaks to the spiritless aspect of this world, In some instances, the initial meaning of these traditions has been lost over time and no one ever questions their beginnings. The meaning behind millions of students wearing the mortarboard hat at graduation is a case in point that I believe slipped through the cracks. After much research, I am convinced that the centuries-old tradition of wearing these funny-looking hats at graduation originated in the Middle Age stonemason apprenticeship schools of Europe. I believe this old tradition occurred when the stonemason apprentice graduated to the degree level of master mason. This is why Kanye West, he conveyed that principle just when it comes to those albums that he released in the beginning of his career. That's what it represented. In college, what do you earn? You earn your degree. it's the same concept. It's Masonic. And I've been to college. I didn't graduate, but I've been to college. But you understand that a part of it is a hustle, man. It's a hustle. It's a big financial hustle. I mean, you actually paying to learn. That's how you know that it's more about indoctrination rather than you actually learning and you being edified about something. It's just indoctrination. It's just preparation. It's the same thing with elementary school and grade school and all that stuff. A stonemason's mortarboard is a flat piece of wood measuring about 24 inches square. It is usually placed on a stand on a scaffolding near the wall being built. The mortarboard held the wet mortar until the stone setter applied it to the stones with the mason's trowel. The setter then placed the mortar stone into the wall. After the mortar dried around the stone, a strong, solid wall was formed. A skull cap was a brimless cloth cap typically worn in the ancient stonemason's day. Taken together, the mortarboard and skull cap look exactly like a modern graduation cap. Today's graduation caps are even called mortarboard hats. That's what it is. And it just goes back to this understanding, the stonemason, as well as just the overall concept of the Scottish Rite, Freemason, the rites, where you enter in between the twin pillars and you reach that level of masonry. You become a master mason after you reach that 33rd degree. That's just what it's about. This album right here from Kanye West, this represents like the pre-entry point to, this entering in between the twin pillars. That's what it represents, because it's like a prerequisite where you have to fall out of favor and turn aside in order for you to enter in between the twin pillars, or in order for you to become a mason, or in order for you to reach a certain level in the concept of masonry where you believe you're your own God. You have to turn aside. It speaks to like where Nas, where he said that he, at 12, he went to hell for choking Jesus or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like you have to say something or do something that represents turning aside, in a way where you convey it indirectly, or in a way where you convey it in a way that, it matches up with the motif in terms of the Masonic understanding or the Pagan fount, so on and so forth. And in this case, you have multiple elements of it just when it comes to the understanding of the psychopomp with the bear representing the spirit god, the left-hand spirit god, right? You have the entry point subsequent to this album, that being late registration. But this is apropos. This is important because this is the first representing his falling out, him falling out of favor with the Heavenly Father. That's why you have songs on this album like All Falls Down and Jesus Walks. He says Jesus walks with him, but he's telling you how he's been broken down by the devil and he hasn't spoke to Jesus in so long. He hasn't committed himself to righteousness the way he used to, because he's been broken down. I believe that car accident was more than meets the eye. I believe it was something that was based in the form of programming. Some sort of, traumatizing, element in the process of being broken down, just when it comes to MK Ultra. Because Kanye West is someone who's definitely put under the programming. And they've done multiple things to him in order for him to be reprogrammed throughout the years, throughout the course of his career. Right? But that's a deeper element, more for like Patreon or something like that. But just when it comes to the conveyance of this, this is the start, and then you have the middle, and then you have the ending. It's all within the concepts of masonry. You have that triangle, you have that understanding of the pyramid. Just when it comes to his first 3 albums, going into the paces, where you reach that zenith, that 33rd degree, and you graduate,
Kids graduate from university. Incidentally, the word graduate comes from two words: gradually indoctrinate. So consequently, when you graduate, you come out with a square martyr board. The martyr board is a symbol of Masonry. This is why you go to college, to get a degree. Consequently, you need to understand that all universities and colleges in the Western world operate under the Vatican. All universities and colleges. So if you want to save your money to send your kids to college, just remember you're sending them to a Jesuit, Catholic-dominated ancient Roman Empire system, whereby your children are to gradually be indoctrinated into a system of religion, politics, and theology. As far back as the 4th, 5th, and 6th century, we know that the escapades of the popes, many of them were homosexuals, most of them were murderers. They were all offsprings of bankers. The entire Vatican system was a banking system. Today's Uniform Commercial Code is based on the old Vatican canon law. So once you understand, the church, government, politics are all interconnected, and the secret societies have been manipulating them all from day one.
Now this right here is the greatest example of someone entering in between the twin pillars. He's on a pathway to enlightenment. You see the light hovering over the psychopomp. This represents opening the doors. Obviously you see him, he went through the doors. It represents opening the doors to Masonry, just when it comes to the pathway to enlightenment. Remember 11 represents the pillars. You enter in between the twin pillars of Boaz and Yakin, and then you reach enlightenment on the pathway. This is why the next album was Graduation. He reached enlightenment, and then he had to commit the ultimate sacrifice, reaching his power, but you had to give up something in order for you to gain more power. He reached that 33rd degree. This right here is a perfect example of someone who conveys the Masonic principles in regards to the pathway to enlightenment. Just when it comes to those specific principles, the paces. He has the bear as the psychopomp, which is the spirit guide, guiding him to enlightenment. That's why the light is hovering over the psychopomp, the bear. Kanye West, he's on the pathway, or he was on the pathway, just in regards to the conveyance of these albums. This is obviously a conveyance of the Masonic understanding when it comes to entering in between the pillars. The doors right here represent Boaz and Yakin. You walk through the doors to the pathway to enlightenment. And remember, college dropout represents the falling out of favor. He dropped out. He fell out of favor with the Most High. Even though you have songs like Jesus Walks and whatnot on there, overall the motif, the conveyance represents him falling out of favor with the Most High and turning aside. This is why you have the pathway to enlightenment. To that third album, just when it comes to the theme of school, the school represents him learning and understanding the left hand. That's what it represents. And he graduated. He got his 33rd degree. You see how it all ties in just when it comes to the school element, especially, college, going back to the groves. It's all under the umbrella of Luciferianism. That's what it is. As we can see here, this is Kanye West's third album, completing that pyramid. This is why you have the pyramid right there, on the bottom side, on the right, where he's being blasted or catapulted out of some sort of chaotic-like deity, representing America, representing the world, where he goes from one world to another world, a different world. And it's funny because, he has like a bar that's kind of an allusion to that, to a degree, where he says, I ain't one of the Cosbys, I ain't go to Hillman. Just talking about, that underlying connection to a different world, just regards to, what I'm laying out. Obviously, on the surface, he's talking about, the Cosby Show and Hillman. He ain't go to Hillman. I ain't one of the Cosbys. I ain't go to Hillman. It's like that fictional school, that imaginary black school, supposed to represent some sort of like freedom in terms of, getting away from this beast, this system, a different world, right? So, he gets shot out of this sort of deity or some sort of chaotic like element that includes other psychopomps, where you see like a rabbit and a cat, and also I can't make that out, but it looks like some sort of animal and representing the psychopomp, because you have these other animals in comparison to the bear, which is the ultimate psychopomp, the spirit god representing Kanye West transitioning. He's reaching that 33rd degree. He graduated and now he's entering that other world. In that other world, there was a difference just in how it's parallel to what happened from graduation to 808s and Heartbreak, what took place between those two albums. We already understand. And that was a part of his transition, So graduation just represents, that finality in regards to completing the paces. The third album is like that final capstone where you put that last side to the piece on the pyramid, almost in resemblance to building that ziggurat. Even though it was unfinished, it's like in these days they're trying to put that final proverbial capstone. And when it comes to the understanding of the pyramid, just in regards to the principles, the three sides, the three element is something that's very, very important. This is why this was the third album, because it's a part of that, that conveyance of the understanding going back to the pyramid, as well as under, other elements of the number 3, which we've gone over. But that's a part of the reason why this was his third album. And also, let's not forget, you see, that little one eye symbolism there. We already know what that represents. We already know it's like a reoccurring thing. It's something that they have to reassure and reaffirm. Just when it comes to the conveyance of the one-eyed symbolism, whether it be the left or the right, we see it on that little chaotic looking deity or whatever it is that Kanye West is being shot out of. We know that this psychopomp, the bear, represents Kanye West. So Kanye West's graduation album artwork by Takashi Murakami blended hip-hop and Japanese pop art. The cover for Graduation was created by famed artist Takashi Murakami in 2007, featuring Kanye's iconic dropout bear, which is, it's the psychopomp, that spirit animal, that spirit guide. Launched into a psychedelic anime-inspired universe, the artwork helped redefine album visuals, turning the release into a full-blown cultural moment. And it did. It had a lot of impact just when it comes to hip hop overall. Kanye's approach, his level of artistry, something that, is definitely revered and respected amongst, a lot of hip hop people. I mean, now he's just crazy and bugged out, but he's still someone who's respected in terms of his artistry.
"23 years ago today, if you will cast your minds back, on this same occasion, I gave the opening prayer in which I said, quote, 'We have met here today clothed in the black robes of a false priesthood.' Now, many have asked me since then whether I really said such a shocking thing, but nobody has ever asked what I meant by it. Why not? Well, some knew the answer already, and as for the rest, we do not question things at the BYU. But, well, you expect that.
We have to understand, in this Babylonian society, almost everything is influenced by it. It's influenced by the pagan Babylonian fount, the Masonic fount. When it comes to the clothing that we wear, when it comes to the shoes and the brands, Nike, Adidas, all this stuff. It's not to say that if we wear it, it's wicked. It's not to say that if you go to college, you're wicked. But just understand that this world is a Babylonian world. It just is what it is. That's just, the truth. As you can see here, when it comes to the college campuses, in regards to, the layout, just the greenery and the trees and, the gardenry and things of that nature, it all goes back to the groves. It all goes back to the groves of old, going into the worship system of Asherah, the pagan goddesses and gods that's associated with these land masses and the greenery and the groves. Also, we already understand, like the Ivy League, going back to the ivy plant that's associated with, the boy god known as Sissus or Kisses or Kisos or something like that. Kisos is like the Phrygian god associated with Dionysus, associated with Pan, because he was the satyr, half boy, half goat. It's all under the umbrella of Luciferianism, as we already understand. So, when we see these images here of these college campuses, we already understand that the layout, it all goes back to the groves, and it's purposeful. It all goes back to the understanding of the worship system, the greenery, Pan, the Celtic goddesses, Celtic gods, woodlands, the understanding of the Norse mythology, just when it comes to the Germanic peoples. And we're going to go over that, but this is what it goes back to, and this is the understanding. We have to understand that this world is pervasive in terms of the, Babylonian pagan influence. Just is what it is. In ancient pagan religions, sacred groves were areas of natural woodland considered to be holy and imbued with spiritual significance. These groves served as temples and places of worship, often associated with specific deities and rituals. Examples include the Celtic Nemetan, the Greco-Roman Temenos or Temenos, and various Germanic sacred woods. Yeah, and Temenos, it's pretty much like a sacred landmass where people would go into worship. And a lot of our people went into these type of systems of worship, just when it comes to how they partook in the pagan understanding, like Solomon and most of our people in certain captivities. We partook in these things, especially going into the worship of Astarte or Asherah. But yeah, like just when it comes to these type of trees or masses of land where, it's pretty much considered to be a grove, it was based in worship of pagan deities, pagan gods, not the worship of the Most High, which is why he forbade us. It's why he told us to destroy all these groves and these graven images that, were a part of these groves. Trees hold a particular role in Germanic paganism and Germanic mythology, both as individuals, sacred trees, and in groups, sacred groves. Yes, pretty much the understanding of the groves is pretty much going into the greenery or, a view or a collection of trees that's in a landmass of greenery, green grass and whatnot. That's where the groves come from. And this is, the understanding of what you see with the college campuses. And also in groups, also individuals as the sacred trees. The central role of trees in Germanic religion is noted in the earliest written reports about the Germanic peoples, with the Roman historian Tacitus stating that Germanic cult practices took place exclusively in groves rather than temples. Scholars consider that reverence for and rites performed at individual trees are derived from the mythological role of the world tree Yggdrasil. Yes, because they went into worship. They went into worship of these sacred trees, going into the understanding of what the element or what the environment presented, what the veneration system was in that environment, just when it comes to groves and, certain trees that were of worship, just like, in Norse mythology with Yggdrasil, going back to the Norse god known as Woden. That's what it goes back to. It goes back to Woden or Odin. The Norse god, that's the inspiration for Santa Claus, with the tree, Christmas tree. You feel what I'm saying? So it's all tied together. Woden was someone who hung himself. He sacrificed himself on a tree. And he believed to have gained wisdom from hanging himself, being that Yggdrasil was a tree of worship. So it just goes back to the Norse understanding. Onomastic and some historical evidence also connects individual deities to both groves and individual trees. Exactly as I laid out, like we understand Asherah is connected to the groves. This is why the Most High, he pretty much told our people to not go into that and destroy all them groves and all them trees, because it's based in worship system. And it's also an understanding. It's kind of like how everything comes full circle, because we understand a tree that was forbidden just in regards to the inception of the first sin with Adam and Eve, where they were told not to partake in the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. But we know that the tree represented or was a metaphor for people actually teaching, but it still goes into the same understanding, because What does a tree do that people do? We provide fruit. We provide, we produce. A tree reproduces, reproduces or produces, just like we do as human beings. So it's very important for us to understand, how these concepts all tie in. The Most High forbade us from partaking in those teachings, but the trees is used to represent teachings because, it's almost alike in the sense of the understanding of consuming something, where I produce and you consume. So the tree is the producer and the consumer is the person that's learning from the tree, or quote unquote eating from the tree, eating the fruit that comes forth from the tree, right? This right here is a grove in India, an ancient monolith, just representing what we will understand as, the depiction of somewhere where Pan would be, or Saturn in the woodlands, representing this greenery, this land mass or landscape of greenery or woods or a forest, going into the understanding of the system of worship. They partook in customs that went into worship, so on and so forth. Even in like the Celtic tradition where they worship the druidic trees, just going into the oak tree. So all these things just go into the pagan fount. These people who partake in polytheism, they go into the understanding of different religions and different gods, and they go into these customs. They don't really understand what they're doing. That's why we must uphold the customs of the one true God and separate ourselves from all this nonsense, because that's what this world consists of. It just consists of nonsense and misunderstanding. But some people, they willingly partake in it because, it's something that means more to them than the one true understanding. And it just speaks to the delineation, because 9 times out of 10, that understanding is based in someone who is not even an Israelite. So it's not even really in their spirit. A lot of people partake in these things because the Most High utilizes this delineation, this separation, where it's just, it plays out in the outset. Like, this is what you're meant for because you're not an Israelite. It just is what it is. The Most High separated us. Different types of Baal statues and images were usually set up near the grove, which was also a pagan object of worship. See my documents under Asherah and Baal and Baalim for the different types of Baal. Yeah, you have many different types of Baal, but it all goes back to the same concept or the same entity or the same triume, just when it comes to those people who led that tower and built the tower, the ziggurat. The grove, or Hebrew Asherah, was carved to resemble the false goddess Ashereth or Astarte. Today, Asherah's name has changed and is now being venerated as Mary. Yeah, Asherah is venerated as Mary, as well as, many different female pagan goddesses, going all the way back to Semiramis, Eve, so on and so forth, just when it comes to the understanding of the people who lived before and after the flood, during the time of, that tower being led, as well as the time of Atlantis. Right? So it's very important for us to put things in proper perspective, just when it comes to identifying, where these things come from when it comes to the pagan fount. Judges 6:25 and 28. And it came to pass the same night that the Lord said unto him, take thy father's young bullock, even the second bullock of 7 years old, and throw down the altar of Baal that thy father hath, and cut down the grove that is by it. And when the men of the city arose early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was cast down, and the grove was cut down that was by it. And the second bullock was offered upon the altar that was built. Exodus 34 and 13. But ye shall destroy their altars, break their images, and cut down their groves. So we know the importance of what these groves represent just when it comes to the left hand. And we already understand the Most High forbade us from partaking in that type of veneration system. But our people did so because they were influenced by what was around them when it comes to the people that were heathen. Just is what it was. And this understanding goes into, how they pretty much, they neighbored, or they had wives that were of the other nations, and they partook in the customs of those other nations. Deuteronomy 7:5. But thus shall ye deal with them. You shall destroy their altars, and break down their images, and cut down their groves, and burn their graven images with fire. 2 Kings 17:15-16. And they rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers, and his testimonies which he testified against them. And they followed vanity and became vain, and went after the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom the Lord had charged them, that they should not do like them. And they left all the commandments of the Lord their power, and made them molten images, even 2 calves, and made a grove, and worship all the hosts of heaven, and serve Baal. The hosts of heaven, when it comes to the celestial elements. And this is what is being worshipped today in regards to this society, just when it comes to the constellations and whatnot, Sirius, so on and so forth, Saturn, the sun.
One of the things that the anti-Masonic Party did is that it's really responsible for the creation of all these senior societies and these college fraternities. I mean, like the Greek system. I mean, all these organizations really have their roots in Freemasonry, and Freemasonry sort of became disreputable, and that led to, ironically, Skull and Bones and Scroll and Key and Wolf's Head and all these, senior societies at Yale and all these other, Phi Beta Kappa. I mean, all these fraternities and so on were really created by Freemasons to maintain that system without having, the Masonic tinge that had become sort of disreputable. But of course, by the late 18th century, early 19th century, the anti-Masonic Party was totally forgotten, and you had record numbers of men. It would almost be something like, I don't know the percentage of adult men, but I think there was like 20 or 30 million men involved in Freemasonry, like at the turn of the century in this country. And I'm sure it wasn't that much different up in Canada either.